Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive.
Yeah.
Today we're doing part one
Part one
of our deep dive into the current affairs
Rough.
from March 28, 2025.
Absolutely.
So if you're a UPSC aspirant,
Huh.
this is really crucial information for you.
Yeah.
You might recognize some of these from previous deep dives, but
yeah,
think of that as a good thing, right?
absolutely. Repetition is key
Repetition, yeah.
when it comes to the UPSC.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is a good way to solidify all that information in your brain.
Cement it in.
And yeah, so as always,
Yeah.
the goal here is to give you all the most important information and insights
Yeah.
from all these different news sources that we've been looking at.
It's all about being concise.
Yeah, and we want to make sure that you know everything that you need to know for your exam. So
For the exam.
like I said, this is part one. We have a ton of stuff to get through today.
Gosh.
So let's just jump right into it.
Let's do it.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
The first topic is the Senkaku Islands. This one's been in the news a lot lately.
It has.
And, you know, basically, Japan's getting really worried because China's Coast Guard has been hanging around the islands a lot recently.
Yeah, they've been having this like prolonged presence there.
Yeah, it's more than just like, you know, passing through.
It's definitely sending a message.
Yeah, it is.
And this is what Japan considers their territorial waters. So, you know, that's adding another layer to this whole situation.
Yeah, it's definitely escalating things a little bit.
For sure. And, you know, for those of you who need a refresher,
Yeah.
the Senkaku Islands are uninhabited.
Right.
They're in the East China Sea,
Mm-hmm.
and they're about 90 nautical miles north of the Yaeyama Islands, which are part of Okinawa Prefecture in Japan.
Okay.
And then they're also about 120 nautical miles northeast of Taiwan,
So they're kind of right in between.
right in the middle of everything.
Yeah, it's a pretty strategic location.
And, you know, it's not just the location, it's the different names that are adding to the confusion. So Japan calls them the Senkaku Islands.
Right.
China calls them the Diaoyu Islands.
Mm-hmm.
And Taiwan calls them the Diaoyutai Islands.
Wow.
And some people just call them the Pinnacle Islands.
So many names for such a small group of islands.
Right, but it just shows you how important they are to all these different countries.
Yeah, and it's not like this is a new dispute either.
No, this has been going on for decades.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is something that you definitely need to know for your international relations studies.
And just to be clear, you know, it's not just one island we're talking about here.
No, it's a whole group of islands.
Right. The main ones that you're going to want to remember are Utsuri Island,
Utsuwa.
Kuba Island, Taisho Island, which is sometimes also called Kumiakashima,
Right.
Kitakujima,
Mm-hmm.
Minamikujima,
Yeah.
Toyef Okinawa Taiwa, and Okinawa-Nami-Iwa.
It's a mouthful.
Yeah, I know, it's a lot.
But, you know, those are the key players in this whole dispute. Right. Now, the total land area of all these islands combined is pretty small. It's only about 6.3 square kilometers.
Wow.
Yeah. And the biggest island out of all of them is Utsuri Island, which is about 3.6 square kilometers.
That's tiny.
It is. But don't let the size fool you. This is a big deal.
Right.
And it gets even more interesting when you look at the geology of the islands.
Yep.
So they're made up of conglomerate sandstone, tuff, andesite, and andesitic lava,
Okay.
along with coral outcroppings.
Interesting.
Yeah. And the whole area has a pretty active volcanic history, and there are a lot of fault lines which have played a big role in shaping the islands.
So they're like little volcanic islands.
They are, yeah.
No.
But, you know, all that geology aside, the real issue here is those overlapping territorial claims.
Yeah, that's the heart of the matter.
Exactly. And Japan is saying that these islands were never under the administration of any other country before they incorporated them in 1895. And right now, Japan is the one who has administrative control over the islands as part of Ishigaki City in Okinawa Prefecture.
So it's like a little tiny piece of Japan.
It is, yeah,
Huh?
but it's causing a huge geopolitical headache.
Yeah, sounds like it.
And it just goes to show you how even a small, uninhabited group of islands can become a major point of contention in international relations.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So definitely keep this one on your radar for your UPSC studies.
Okay, we will.
Now let's switch gears a bit and talk about something a little closer to home. The PM-SHRI Scheme and the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan.
Oh, yeah, this one's been in the news, too.
Yeah, there's been a bit of a standoff.
A standoff.
Yeah, so basically a parliamentary channel is urging the Education Ministry to release some pending funds for the SSA, the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan.
Okay.
And we're talking a lot of money here, over 4,000 crore rupees.
Wow.
To Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and West Bengal.
And why are they holding back the funds?
Well, it seems these states haven't signed the Memorandum of Understanding for the PM-SHRI scheme.
Oh, okay.
And the panel is arguing that holding back funds for the SSA because of this disagreement over a newer scheme is actually hindering the implementation of the Right to Education Act,
Which guarantees free and compulsory education for kids between the ages of 6 and 14.
Exactly.
So they're saying that, these are two separate things and the kids shouldn't suffer.
Yeah, essentially.
Okay, so let's just take a minute to clarify what these schemes are all about.
Absolutely.
So the PM-SHRI scheme, that stands for PM Schools for Rising India,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a centrally sponsored initiative.
Yeah.
That was launched under the New Education Policy 2020.
The NEP.
The NEP.
Yeah.
And basically the goal is to establish about 14,500 model schools.
Model schools.
All over India.
It's a pretty ambitious goal.
Yeah. It's,
But I think it has the potential to really transform the education system.
Right, and these aren't just like regular schools.
No, these are like next level schools.
Yeah, they're supposed to be like hubs for holistic education.
Holistic education.
Experiential learning, inquiry-driven learning.
Mm-hmm.
And they're also supposed to be really focused on developing those 21st century skills.
Right, like critical thinking, creativity, problem solving.
Exactly.
All of the things that kids need to succeed in today's world.
And all of this is supposed to happen in like an eco-friendly infrastructure.
Yeah, they're really emphasizing sustainability, which is great.
And then there's the whole competency-based assessment thing,
Right.
which is like a big shift from the traditional way of doing things.
It is, yeah.
It's more about like showing what you can actually do.
Exactly. It's not just about memorizing facts and figures.
Right. It's about like applying that knowledge
Mm-hmm.
in real-world situations.
Exactly.
So it's a pretty different approach.
It is.
And I'm curious to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so then we have the SSA,
The Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan.
the Samagra Shiksha Abhiyan.
Mm-hmm.
This one's also centrally sponsored, but it has like a much broader scope.
It does. It covers education from pre-primary all the way up to higher secondary.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really trying to ensure that everyone has access to quality education.
And it's the main way that the central government supports the states
Mm-hmm.
in implementing that Right to Education Act.
The RTE.
Yeah, the RTE.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So
Yeah, the SSA is really focused on key areas like developing school infrastructure, providing teacher training,
okay.
improving learning outcomes, and promoting inclusive education for all students.
Especially students from disadvantaged backgrounds.
Absolutely.
Okay, so both of these schemes sound really important.
They are.
But it sounds like there's a little bit of a power struggle going on.
Well, I wouldn't say a power struggle, but there's definitely some tension there
Yeah.
between the center and the states.
And it's all about funding, right?
Well, funding is definitely a big part of it.
Okay.
The center wants the states to sign on to the PM-SHRI scheme.
Mm-hmm.
And the states are saying, hey, we need those SSA funds first.
Right.
So it's a bit of a stalemate.
Okay, and what about that funding pattern for PM-SHRI?
Right. So that follows the typical pattern for centrally sponsored schemes,
Okay.
which is a 60.40 split between the center and the states.
60.40.
Yeah, and then for the northeastern and Himalayan states, it's a more generous 90.10 ratio.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you can see how this whole situation is really highlighting the complexities of center-state relations,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to something as crucial as education.
Right, and I imagine that's something that could definitely come up on the UPSC exam.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So make sure you have a good understanding of this issue.
All right, we will.
Now let's move on to a topic that's been generating a lot of debate.
Okay.
The new data protection law and its potential impact on the Right to Information Act.
Yeah, I've heard some things about this.
Yes, it's a pretty big deal.
What's going on?
So there's this section in the new Digital Personal Data Protection Act,
Mm-hmm.
the DPDP Act.
Okay, which is Section 44.3.
Okay.
And it's causing a lot of concern.
Why is that?
Well, activists are worried that this section could weaken the RTI Act.
The Right to Information Act.
Exactly.
And that's like a cornerstone of transparency
It is.
in India.
Absolutely.
So how could this new law weaken the RTI Act?
Well, basically, Section 44 of the DPDP Act amends Section 8.1 of the RTI Act.
Which deals with exemptions from disclosing information.
Exactly. And this amendment makes it easier to deny information requests by citing the need to protect personal data.
Oh, I see.
So basically, under the old RTI Act, personal information could only be withheld if it had no relation to public interest.
Okay.
Or if disclosing it would be an invasion of privacy. But there was this crucial clause that said that this exemption wouldn't apply if there was a larger public interest at stake.
Okay.
So you could still get that information if you could prove that it was in the public interest to know.
I see.
But now with this new amendment, that larger public interest clause has been removed.
Yeah. So now any personal information can be withheld without any consideration of the public interest.
So it's like a blanket exemption.
Yeah, pretty much.
And that's a pretty big shift.
It is, yeah.
Because before it was like a case-by-case thing.
Right.
You know, they had to weigh the privacy of the individual against the public interest.
Exactly.
But now it seems like they're just saying, well, all personal data is off limits.
Yeah, that's the concern.
And what kind of impact could this have in the real world?
Well, let's say you wanted to request information about the assets of a public official.
Okay.
Maybe you suspect them of corruption. Under the old RTI framework, you could make that request.
Okay.
And if it was deemed that the public interest in uncovering corruption outweighed the official's privacy,
Right.
then you could get that information.
Okay.
But now, under this new amendment, that request could be denied outright.
Just because it's considered personal data?
Exactly.
Wow, that's a pretty big change.
It is.
And I can see why people are worried.
Yeah, and the critics are arguing that this amendment could actually weaken personal data protection in other areas, too.
How so?
Well, the DPDP Act itself has provisions that allow government agencies to be exempt from certain data protection rules
Okay.
in matters of national security, sovereignty, or public order.
So the government can still access personal data,
Potentially, yeah.
but citizens might not be able to.
That's the concern.
Wow.
And then there's the whole issue of how this compares to international data protection standards.
Like the GDPR.
Right. The GDPR in the EU has much stricter safeguards on government exemptions.
Okay.
So yeah, this is a complex issue with a lot of different angles.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
But it's an important one to understand for the UPSC exam.
Definitely.
Because it really gets at the heart of the balance between transparency, accountability, and individual privacy,
Right.
which is a crucial theme in governance and human rights.
Okay, well, let's shift gears again
Sounds good.
and talk about something a little more exciting.
Okay.
The Tejas LCA Mk1A program.
Oh, yes, the Tejas.
Yeah, so there's been some good news on that front.
There has.
GE Aerospace has started delivering those F404 IN-20 jet engines to Hindustan Aeronautics Limited
HAO.
for the Tejas LCA Mk1A fighter jet.
Finally.
Yeah, they were delayed for a while.
Yeah, there were some setbacks,
But the first engine was shipped on March 26th.
which is great news for the program.
Yeah, and HAL is planning to produce 12 of these jets this year.
12 this year.
And then they're going to ramp up production to 24 per year.
That's ambitious.
Yeah, it is. But the Indian Air Force really needs these new jets.
Yeah. Their squadron strength is currently below the sanctioned level.
How far below?
Well, they have about 31 squadrons right now.
Okay.
But they're supposed to have 42.5.
So they're more than 10 squadrons short.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big gap.
It is. And that's why getting these Tejas jets into service is so important.
Okay, so
Yeah.
for those of us who might not be like total defense experts,
Sure.
can you just give us a quick rundown of what the Tejas LCA Mk1A is?
Absolutely. So the Tejas LCA Mk1A is an upgraded version of India's indigenous light combat aircraft, the Tejas,
Oh, yeah.
which was developed by HAL.
Okay.
And this Mk1A variant has over 40 improvements
40 improvement.
over the Mk1.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a significant upgrade.
So what kind of improvements are we talking about?
Well, a major area of improvement is the avionics.
Okay.
The Mk1A is equipped with AESA radar,
ESA radar.
active electronically scanned array radars,
Oh, wow.
which are much more advanced than the radars on the Mk1.
How so?
Well, they can scan a much wider area,
Right.
and they're much harder to jam.
So it's like having much better eyesight
Exactly.
for the aircraft.
Yeah, it's a huge advantage in combat.
Okay. And what kind of AESA readers does it have?
So it has both the Israeli ELM 2052 AESA radar
Okay.
and the indigenous UDM AESA radar.
So we're using both domestic and foreign technology.
Exactly.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, and then there are also enhanced electronic warfare systems,
Oh, wow.
including a unified electronic warfare suite, the UEWS, and an advanced self-protection jammer pod.
So it can defend itself against electronic attacks.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
Yeah, and then the digital fly-by-wire system has also been upgraded
All right.
with a more advanced flight control computer, the DFCC Mk1A.
So that's going to make it more maneuverable.
Yeah, and more stable.
Okay. And what about weapons?
Well, it has 9 hard points,
9 hard points.
which means it can carry a lot of different weapons.
Okay, like what?
Well, it can carry air-to-air missiles, air-to-ground missiles, beyond visual range missiles,
Okay.
and even advanced short-range air-to-air missiles like ASRAM.
Wow, so it's like a multi-role fighter.
It is, yeah. It can handle a lot of different missions.
Okay, and they've also made it more efficient.
Yeah, they've reduced the weight
Okay.
and improved the maintainability.
So it can spend more time in the air
Exactly.
and less time in the hangar.
Right.
Okay. And what about that engine, the F404IN20?
Right. So that's manufactured by GE Aerospace,
Mm-hmm.
and it was selected back in 2004. And it's a high-thrust variant of the F404 engine family,
Okay.
which is a very well-established and reliable engine.
And it was specially tailored for the Indian Air Force.
Yeah, it has higher flow fans and single crystal turbine blades,
Wow.
which are designed to meet the IAF's specific requirements.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And this engine also helped the Tejas achieve supersonic flight.
Really?
Yeah, back in 2008, it reached Mach 1.1 during its initial test flights.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah, it was a big moment for the program.
So how many of these Tejas Mk1A jets has the IAF ordered?
So they've ordered 83,
83.
and they're expected to be delivered by 2028.
Okay, so that's going to be a big boost for the IAF.
It is, yeah. It's a major step towards self-reliance and defense.
Okay, and how does the Tejas Mk1A compare to other fighter jets out there?
Well, it's considered a lighter and more cost-effective multi-role fighter compared to a lot of the foreign-made jets.
Mm-hmm.
But it's important to note that it doesn't have the same level of stealth technology as some of those fifth-generation fighter aircraft.
Okay, but overall, it sounds like a pretty impressive aircraft.
It is, yeah. It's a real testament to India's growing technological capabilities.
Okay, well, let's move on from fighter jets
Okay.
to satellites.
That's all
There's
good.
been some news about the GSAT-18 satellite.
Yeah, the Public Accounts Committee has raised some concerns.
Oh, what kind of concerns?
Well, they're worried about the economic viability of the satellite
Okay.
because 6 of its transponders are going to be unused until 2027.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and that's going to result in a revenue loss of about 117 crore rupees.
Wow. That's a lot of money.
It is, and that's why the PSC has recommended that the Department of Space be more careful when they're planning these big satellite projects.
They need to make sure that they're actually going to use all of the capacity.
Exactly, because it's public money that we're talking about here.
Right.
So they need to be fiscally responsible.
Okay, so can you just give us a little bit of background on what GSAT-18 is?
Sure. So GSAT-18 is a communications satellite. Okay.
That was launched by ISRO.
The Indian Space Research Organization?
Exactly.
Right.
And it was launched on an Ariane 5 VA-231 rocket.
From French Guiana?
From French Guiana, yeah.
Okay.
And it weighs over 3,000 kilograms.
Wow.
And it has a mission life of about 15 years.
So it should be operational until 2032.
Right.
Okay.
And it was placed into a geosynchronous transfer orbit,
Okay.
and it's controlled by ISRO's Master Control Facility in Hassan, Karnataka.
So it's like a pretty important satellite.
It is, yeah. It's part of ISRO's fleet of communication satellites,
Okay.
which currently has about 14 satellites.
Okay.
And it provides a variety of services like television broadcasting, telecommunications, VSAT services,
Okay.
and digital satellite news gathering.
So it's pretty versatile.
It is, yeah.
Okay, so this whole situation with the unused transponders,
Yeah,
it just shows how important it is to plan these projects carefully
absolutely.
and to make sure that we're getting the most out of our investments.
Right, because these space projects are expensive. Yeah. And we need to make sure that they're actually benefiting the public.
Okay, well, let's move on from space
Okay.
to a more down-to-earth topic,
Okay.
the Bandipur Tiger Reserve.
Oh, yeah.
So there's been some back and forth between Karnataka and Kerala
Right.
about buses traveling through the reserve at night.
Yeah, so Karnataka has refused to increase the number of buses that are allowed to go through the reserve at night.
Okay, so how many are allowed right now?
Right now, it's 4 buses in each direction.
4 buses.
Yeah, so 8 total.
Okay,
And Kerala wanted to increase that number.
but Karnataka said no.
Yeah, they're worried about the impact on the wildlife.
Right, because the Bandipur Tiger Reserve is like a really important conservation area.
It is. Yeah, it's home to a lot of endangered species.
Okay, so can you just give us a little bit of information about the reserve?
Sure. So the Bandipur Tiger Reserve is located in the Mysore and Chamarajanaga districts of Karnataka.
Oh.
And it's a really important part of the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Exactly.
Okay.
And it's surrounded by other protected areas like the Nagarhole Tiger Reserve, the Mudumalai Tiger Reserve, and the Wayanad Wildlife Sanctuary.
So it's like a whole network of protected areas.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
And the Bandipur Reserve itself is bounded by the Kabini River in the north.
Okay.
And the Moya River in the south.
Oh.
And it has a tropical climate with wet and dry seasons.
Okay.
And it's home to a huge variety of plants and animals.
Like what?
Well, it has everything from dry deciduous forests to tropical mixed deciduous forests.
Okay.
And it has commercially valuable species like rosewood and sandalwood.
Okay.
And then in terms of animals, it has the largest wild Asian elephant population in South Asia.
Wow.
Yeah. And it also has Bengal tigers, gar sloth, bears, jackals, holes,
Wow.
and even the rare four-horned antelope.
So it's like a really biodiverse area.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a real treasure.
And that's why they're so careful about letting buses through at night.
Exactly, because they don't want to disturb the wildlife.
Right.
And it's a tough balance,
Yeah.
because people need to be able to get around,
Mm-hmm.
but we also need to protect our environment.
Yeah. It's a classic dilemma.
It is.
Okay, well, let's move on from tigers.
Okay.
Two rhymes.
Rhymes.
Yeah. The Baalpan Ki Kavita Initiative.
Oh, yeah, that's a cool initiative.
Yeah. It was launched by the Union Education Ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, it's all about reviving and preserving traditional Indian rhymes and poems.
For young children.
For young children.
Exactly.
And they want to create like a national compendium.
Yeah, in all the different Indian languages.
Wow, that's ambitious.
It is, yeah. But I think it's a really worthwhile goal.
Yeah, and they're doing it through MyGov.
Yeah, they're inviting contributions from the public,
By
and they're even having a contest.
a contest.
Yeah, where people can submit existing rhymes and poems, as well as newly composed ones.
And it's open to everyone?
Yeah, anyone can participate.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and they have different categories for different age groups.
Yeah.
So pre-primary, grade 1, and grade 2.
And what languages can people submit in?
All the official Indian languages as well as English.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. And they're really encouraging people to submit rhymes and poems that are specific to their region or culture.
Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah, it's a great way to celebrate India's diversity.
Yeah, and to pass on those traditions to the next generation.
Exactly.
Okay, well, let's move on from rhymes to missiles.
Missiles.
Yeah, the VL-SRSAM.
Oh, yeah, the vertically launched short-range surface-to-air missile.
Yeah, that's a mouthful.
It is.
So there was a successful flight test recently.
Yeah, off the coast of Odisha.
And this was developed by DRDO. Right?
Yes, the Defense Research and Development Organization.
Okay, and what's it designed to do?
Well, it's a quick reaction missile that can neutralize aerial threats, including sea-skimming missiles.
Sea-skimming missiles?
Yeah, those are the ones that fly really low over the water to avoid detection.
So this missile can take them out?
Yeah.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, and it has a range of up to 80 kilometers.
80 kilometers?
Yeah.
Wow, that's pretty far.
It is.
Okay, and was initially developed for the Navy, right?
Right, but now they're also developing it for the Air Force.
To protect air bases.
Exactly.
Okay, and what are some of the key features of this missile?
Well, it's about 4 meters long.
4 meters.
Yeah, and it weighs about 170 kilograms.
Okay.
And it uses solid propellant.
Okay.
And it can reach a speed of Mach 4.5.
Wow, that's fast.
It is, yeah. And it can reach an altitude of 16 kilometers.
Okay, and how's it guided?
Well, it uses a combination of inertial guidance and active radar homing.
Okay, so it knows where it's going.
Yeah.
And it can track its target.
Exactly.
Okay, and it can be launched from a canister, right?
Yeah, a twin quad-pack canister.
So it can be deployed quickly.
Right.
Okay, so this is another example of India's growing defense capabilities.
It is, yeah.
Okay, well, let's move on from India to South Korea.
South Korea.
Yeah, there's been some sad news.
Yeah, there were some wildfires.
And they damaged a historic temple.
Yeah, the Gounsa Temple.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's a 1,300-year-old Buddhist temple.
Wow, that's ancient.
It is.
And the wildfires destroyed 2 of its buildings.
Yeah, which were designated as national treasures.
Oh, that's terrible.
It is, yeah. It's a huge loss for South Korea's cultural heritage.
So where's this temple located?
So it's located at the foot of Donggun Mountain.
Okay.
In the town of Iseong.
Okay.
Which is in the southeastern part of the country.
And it was built in the 7th century.
Yeah, during the Silla dynasty.
Wow. And none of the original buildings remain.
No, they've all been replaced over the centuries.
But it still has a lot of historical significance.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting to note that this temple actually managed to survive the Japanese invasions.